I think are we ready?
Yeah, you can go.
Awesome. Okay, Gail, can we I call the meeting to order, the Culture, Climate and Behavior Committee meeting to order at 6:38 p.m. And Gail, can you call the roll, please?
Yeah, you can go.
Yes. Ms. Bishop,
Present.
Mr. Davis, Mr. Coughlin,
Present.
Mr. Chandler,
Here.
or Dr. Chandler.
Here.
Ms. Frise, Ms. Kraft, Ms. Francoise Blue.
Here,
Yeah.
Francois Blue.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Grimes. All right, I know a couple of people are having problems with the links. I'm going to send them in a moment and we'll have some more participants. Dr. Hardy,
I'm here.
Ms. Harris,
Present.
Mr. Henry. Not yet. Ms. Jabber. Oh, she will not be here. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson,
Here, thank you.
Ms. Jones McLeod. She might be late. Ms. McQueen. Dr. Morrison.
I'm here. Hello.
Hi. Mr. Murray. Mr. Poe is waiting to get in. Ms. Sakamaya. Sakamaya. Not yet.
Sakiyama, I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Smithson.
Here.
Ms. Starks Turner. Dr. Starks Turner.
Here.
Ms. Steffens.
Here.
Ms. Parker.
Here.
And Mr. Bean. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go let some other people into the meeting now.
Welcome, Patrick.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Gail, do they need to announce themselves or will you just add them as they come in?
I will add them. If that's okay with you.
That's perfect. Yeah, I just wasn't sure the protocol. Do we have any visitor comments, Gail?
We do not.
I would accept a motion for the approval of the minutes from our October meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is it a roll call, Gail, or is it a voice?
Voice.
All in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting?
Hey.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. The minutes are approved. Now, we are going to go into circle first and foremost, just because our whole topic for tonight, and when the team met, and they're not here tonight, it's about students. It's about the student voice. How can we as a committee support the elevation of that, but also how do we begin to structure this meeting so that it's a little bit different, so that their voice is not only centered, but that they're maybe leading up just ideas, right? Things, how are we going to amplify student voice with this for our committee in our space? And the one thing that we thought we would start out with in circle tonight would be a question about your experience as a student and your voice. So were there times and spaces when you were a student that your voice was heard or not heard? So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. What was your experience of your voice as a student? you can use any space that you like to discuss that. Okay, I'm going to start with, I'm just going by who's on my screen. And I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. And JP, you're actually the first one at the bottom of my screen.
Great. My voice was usually heard. When I was a student at Oak Park High School, I was white. I was funny. At least I thought I was funny. And I'm a nice, relatively nice guy. So when I felt comfortable enough to suggest things to my teachers and to my, it was a dean then, we didn't have counselors. And they would usually roll with it because I think I had a pretty good personality, but I felt privileged enough where I could, unconsciously just think that my opinion mattered and people wanted to hear my opinion. So that was my experience in school.
Thank you, JP. Next is Janelle B. I know we have two. Clarification.
I was unfamiliar with the idea of student voice growing up. I never saw an opportunity to express my opinion, not in school, not at home. I was raised under the children ought to be seen and not heard thinking. And so I knew nothing about student voice growing up. And not that I felt like I was missing anything. I just thought, you don't get a voice.
Thank you, Janelle. Next is Shalima.
Thank you. I think my upbringing is very similar to Janelle's, but one thing that I think was a little bit different is that my mother was also in education, retired from actually special education. And I actually went to an elementary school in Minneapolis that was in a suburb for about my fifth grade year into my sixth grade year that was predominantly white. And immediately I knew that I had a voice that was not definitely going to be facilitated to be heard. And when I would tell my mother about what was happening at that school that was predominantly white, that was the only time my voice was heard. So again, as Janelle, it was, if you had an opinion, the adults gave it to you, how I was raised. But at that time, that was the first time that I was heard because there were some pretty traumatic things that happened at that predominantly white elementary school.
Thank you, Shalima. Patrick P.
We're referring to high school, correct?
Yes.
I went to a high school where Black, Latinx, Asian might have made 2% of the entire school population. So our voice, opinions didn't matter. It was pretty much, this is the way it is, adapt. Wasn't like that in elementary, middle, but for high school, no, I don't think, my experience, I don't think our voice or opinion mattered.
Thank you, Patrick. Next is Karen.
So my school experience was in tiny town, Iowa, and in a earlier generation too. So there's generational differences and rural, small town differences. So I guess I'm thinking back. So I was, the top student in a 48 member class, but I think you could say your opinions about things, but there weren't things like student council or things like that I recall. So I don't recall being asked our opinions. There was lots of extracurriculars where you could have your opinions heard, but it just wasn't, you were taught, and you could say some things, but I don't know that your opinion was really requested or that we even thought it was, something to do. I don't know.
Thank you, Karen. Janelle S.
Hello, everyone. I also, too, Karen, went to a high school in Iowa, very small. We had about 4, not even around 300 student population in our high school. So my experience with that is a bit different, as well as when it comes to diversity of race, there was no diversity of race. It was all white students. And so being in that setting, and I felt that at times I had voice, and typically that voice wasn't in the classroom. That voice was typically shut down in the classroom by teachers who were predominantly men. But I did feel I had a voice in classrooms, or excuse me, in extracurricular activities such as student council and spaces that were involving content or education, but were involving things that we chose to be a part of.
Thank you, Janelle. Lincoln.
Yeah, so the bulk of my K-12 experience, I was in honors classes in magnet schools. And so I don't think I think most of my experience was that, you know, I didn't feel like my voice wasn't heard, and I felt like I had a fair amount of agency and privilege. But what did stick out to me is that I was able to compare my experience in school to the experience of my brother and my neighbors who went to different schools, who were in different contexts. And what struck me from a very early age is that their school experience was very different from mine. So I was on the good side of the experience, but it was always in stark relief to what I saw my peers experiencing.
Felicia.
I'm definitely in the camp of children were to be seen and not heard. So that was really my experience growing up in general. But I will say in high school, I was very active in student government. And so like as a collective group of students, we got to share our thoughts and suggestions. And they're about 50-50 if they were taken, you know, into account or not in something done with it, but just as an individual, you as a child, I was taught to be silent.
Thank you, Felicia. Orson.
So what came to mind for me was an experience at high school where I experienced a pretty significant traumatic event around racism and brought it to the administration and felt like it was swept under the rug. So that was definitely a moment where I felt very silenced. And I feel like in terms of opportunities or moments where my voice was actually heard actually occurred extracurricularly. So opportunities where I was in clubs or volunteer experiences outside of the class where adults really encouraged me to develop and use my voice.
Thank you, Orson. Laura.
I remember being in high school when the administration was starting to include student voice. And I don't know if I was specifically asked to serve as a representative or if they opened it up for applications or how it quite happened, but I served on a committee that hired the principal for our school when I was there, and I was the lone student representative on that, and for hiring a science teacher. And then throughout my high school experience, there was a student who was on the school board as like the student representative, and I held that position at some point. And so I don't remember saying a lot, but remembering that I had the forum to say things and that I was always listened to and respected when I chose to share something.
Thank you, Laura. Susan.
So I went to an all-girls school in the 60s, graduated in 1970. And the school that I went, this was in Massachusetts, suburb of Massachusetts, and suburb of Boston. And there was a cohort in the school. This was an old-time Yankee school. And at that time, they allowed it was new to allow Jews to go, Jewish girls and Black girls to go. So there was a small group of us in my class. And I would say I had a mixed experience. I was the student representative to the curriculum committee for the school. I don't remember what happened in that group, but I was there, I was present, the lone student. And also I was in charge of, we used to have these things called assemblies every Monday morning. And I don't know if I was elected or how I got that position, but as a senior, I did that. And I went out of bounds one day by saying something. Had to do with the anti-war movement and just stuff that was going on in Vietnam. And I said something that was really inflammatory. And it was really, I really got a tongue, lashing over that. And anyway, so yes, there was voice, but I really went outside the bounds with what I said and was disciplined, just verbally, not otherwise. But it left a huge impression on me and confused me about, I didn't know what the rules were. This was kind of new that the school was doing it, so it was tricky.
Thank you, Susan. Patrick H.
Good evening, everybody. Mine was sort of a mixed bag. It was interesting. I was raised by a really strong single mom on the south side of Chicago who was working all the time, so she wasn't often home, and was very cool with us having voice because we often had to advocate for ourselves in the neighborhood, at school, just where else. And so we learned how to speak up. And so on. I went to a Black high school on the south side of Chicago. My principal was Black. My assistant principal was Black. My favorite music teacher was Black. Like, I remember these people. And that's where the mixed bags start, because I was a little bit of a knucklehead my first 2 years of high school. I wasn't very involved in anything. I kind of had my own agenda, and it wasn't a good one. And I was real slick about it too. Got a little bit better, got a brain about myself in my later years, and got involved and so on. And I hope you'll understand what I mean. I had a voice, it was heard, but it was because there was a little bit of favoritism, because I was leading certain activities. I was in some activities where we were winning competitions. I was the leader of some of those extracurriculars where we were winning and bringing recognition to the school. And, I still had that slick streak about me. So, I leveraged the fact that I had a voice and could get some things that I wanted. And that wasn't always a good thing. So it was a mixed bag. I went to a historically Black college. President of the college was Black. I had Black professors. We campaigned and fought against people like David Duke and Edwin Edwards. We had a voice. We fought. We knew how to fight. It wasn't until I got to Harvard where I realized that my voice disappeared. The year I entered Harvard University, only 6% of the students, as I recall, were students of color in the entire 12 schools at Harvard. And that all of that strength, all of that fight, all of that everything, it disappeared very quickly. And I had to learn, along with my peers, we had to learn different ways to have that voice. So it was a mixed bag all the way up until that point. And it stayed that way from that point on. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Greg.
Thanks, Gina. So I grew up a little ways west of here. I grew up in Elmhurst. I went to York High School, and it was a very comfortable, fun high school experience for me. My father was a high school administrator, and so from a very early age, we're not a high school. He was a school administrator. He didn't work in a high school. But from a very early age, I was taught that you don't rock the boat. All right, you're quiet. You go along with things within that school, but it's different than how some other people have talked about that. I was taught that because, Greg, this is set up fairly. The people who are running the school for you have your interest, and I know that because they're my people. So you need to just be quiet and let the school roll for you. But your prompt, Gina, was specifically, right? Well, give me an experience where your voice was not heard. And in my mind throughout this whole conversation, I've had these little incidents pop up, right? Where this individual teacher ticked me off here, or I tried out for this extramural team and I was with these people who were on one team and the whole team didn't make it, including me. And I thought that was ridiculously fair. And we were just silenced as a group. And I mean, there are a number of instances that I could highlight like that, but always, without fail, and it's probably not until this conversation that I've really thought about that, all of those instances I've chalked up to that individual teacher or that individual person who was in charge just being, I mean, as a kid, that person's just an idiot, or that person is just mean, or there's a problem with that individual person. I never felt in any way that in a systemic way, I think that your question implied, that my voice was not welcome. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't even a question that was on my radar. If something bad happened, it was an isolated individual thing. It wasn't bigger than that. So thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Linda.
I think for high school, my voice evolved as I think developmentally I went through each grade level. I went to a magnet program school in the city of Chicago. So my high school started at 7th grade for me. So I went 7th to 12th at the same school. And the advisor for the 7th and 8th grade was a white man. And I didn't know my mom had gone to petition for me to be in honors classes for my 9th grade year. And this counselor or advisor called me down to his office the first time ever, you know, and you're thinking you're in trouble. And he was like, your mom wants you in honors classes. Do you want to be in honors classes? And I'm like, why would anybody pick that for themselves? That sounds like more work. So I was just like, no, maybe not. I mean, I was an 8th grader going into 9th grade. And then I was like, what do you think? You know? And when I got home, my mother was like, don't you ever let somebody talk you out of what you know, so I got this whole advocate for yourself, learn how to speak up, you know, and I didn't know that at that point he was trying to talk me out of like what would have been my future. And so she had to go back and try to reverse some of it with him using as the evidence that your child doesn't want to do this, you know. But as the years went on, it was kind of like what Patrick said. I learned how to get people to listen to me by learning the system. So like by senior, junior year, I was like everything in that school. Like I knew every teacher, I knew everybody. They loved Linda Parker. It was like, what do you need? I was everybody's aide. I was, you know, and at that point, it was like you just write your history. And I've learned how to do that all the way, you know, going forward, that there's a way to get people to listen to you, you know, and there are certain steps you have to take in order for that to happen. And so at that point, I just pretty much have continued that on and throughout, but it's an interesting lesson early on.
Thank you, Linda. Kabreev, welcome. And our question was experiences that you had and how your voice was recognized as a student in high school or not recognized.
Just high school, not K, right? Not K through 8 at all.
Well, if you have something else you wanted to share, you can.
Well, briefly, I went to a predominantly white Catholic school, very much Catholic for K through 8, and I didn't have, and I just did I did what I was supposed to do. Looking back, there's a lot of macro and microaggressions I went through, and even things that set me up going forward for. So advocating, no, didn't have a voice. That just felt like I just didn't really have. I just kind of went along, just kind of get along to the point of just surviving, and then got a little bit more vocal and adamant about my position. About 13, which was about 8th grade. So then I go into high school when I was an IB program at a predominantly Black school, which was then about 70% white. But all of our teachers were white, not one Black teacher. I think we had a Latina teacher. But she actually ended up quitting because she didn't like the injustice of how we had two new books for every student in IB classes, and the rest of the school had very old book textbooks. So she, in protest, quit her job, which I left her for that. But as far as a voice, you quickly learn that as the favorites kind of percolate to the top for the teachers, they could essentially do whatever they wanted to do. And kind of like Patrick, I was kind of a knuckleheaded for us 2 years. But even when you figure it out, is that when you're placed in that kind of position, they don't see beyond that, and they start believing that, and then turns from gaslighting to actually race lighting. So really, maybe I'm not smart enough. So bear in mind, I was an honor student all through middle school and grade school. Then let the doubt of my capabilities kind of crept in a lot, especially in high school, to the point where I didn't even want to sit for my IB exams. My mom made me, and I actually got my IB diploma. And the thing I do remember is the sheer shock of the teachers that I actually passed my IB exams and got my diploma. Now, like, oh, I'm proud of you. Like, oh my gosh, were you studying? We didn't know about your studying. I'm like, wow, that's what you say to kids. You just passed a very four-year, very intense program, right? And took these tests. But I will say no. But I was encouraged at home to have a voice. And so I did fight for myself, also from parents fight for against inequities. And I think that's why I'm on the school board now. Like I'm a fighter, but it's not because I was given a voice in high school. It's because it just kind of got me angry. I had to keep fighting for myself. So answer your question, no. But I developed that voice anyway.
Thank you, Kabriev. And I see that Frances joined us, but she did message me that her sound is not working, so she's not going to be able to participate in that way, but she's here. So I will tell you, having been at Oak Park, right, a student there, my voice was not sought. I became an officer for our drill team, and there was maybe a little bit more of that because of by way of my position. And then I was a secretary for one of my years, a class secretary. By senior year, I had gotten into, I was going the route of Dr. Hardy. I went the opposite direction. It went from, involved to not involved by senior year. So, but the voice piece, I don't recall being sought out in any particular way. And I had an experience on the drill team. There were very few of us, very few Black and students of color on drill team. And the being on the team itself became oppressive because there was not really a place for us to have conversations or feel heard. And it was really, I just recall that stifling feeling, which was part of the reason why I ended up leaving the drill team. So some spaces felt like yes and some no. I was a bit of a rebel, so that could have contributed to it. But the important part, and what I heard so much from you all, I got to everybody, right? I didn't miss anyone. What I heard, so some of the things that I wrote down that you all said that like, wow, I mean, first of all, the varied experiences of everyone, some being heard, one of the pieces that stood out for me is folks learning a skill set for how to get people to listen to them. That is a skill set that was developed. And then also silenced around issues of race, seen and not heard, not really being asked unless there was some kind of leadership position that the people were in. And a lot of student government being a voice place. So it's just interesting, our varied experiences. And when we think about our committee, and we have 3 student representatives, and I went back and counted there, Gil, right? 24 of us on this committee. We have 3 students and 21 adults. So that doesn't feel balanced in any way. But what would make them want to know, what makes them know that their voice is valued and recognized here? And that is, aside from us continually saying it, but how do we do things a little bit differently? So we talked about breaking into groups tonight to answer a few questions. And the first question is, what ideas do you have to increase student voice on CCB in our committee? Like, what are ideas or ways that we might have for us to increase student voice on CCB? I want to put that question, I'm so accustomed to teaching online. I want to just put that question in the chat so you all have it when you go into your breakout rooms. What ideas? And then,
yeah.
Okay. And then the next question, we're going to answer a couple questions in our small groups. Each group is going to have one of us, me, Greg, Patrick, and Lincoln. Are we breaking out to 4 groups? I think our groups might be smaller now.
It's 4 rooms, but there was 6 in each room, but not everyone is online, so it might be a
Some rooms might be smaller. That's okay because we still have 19, so I think we're okay. 17. I think we're in a good place. Still. The second question is, yeah, I love this question. I'm sorry, I can't read my writing sometimes, you all, so I wrote it down. I should have typed it just for the record. Okay, what ideas do you have about increasing teacher voice on our committee? And so there's 2 aspects of when we talk about making sure that we understand fully what's happening in the building, it's students and it's teachers. Like those are the 2 big groups that have like the on the ground experience of what's happening on a daily basis, what it's like to actually be in the building, period to period to period. And so how do we increase the voices of those 2 groups to the extent that we can actually make change happen, right? That we can support the changes that they're experiencing. I can tell you as someone who is a culture and climate coach and no longer in the classroom in that same way, my experience is actually much different now than that of the classroom teacher. I know because I was a classroom teacher and having come out and doing a different role now, I'm like, oh, this is very different. I still need to be plugged into what they're saying about the experience in the classroom and definitely the students. I mean, I haven't been a student for a very long time. So I don't know. I mean, how it was, it's a whole new world. So our 2 questions that we're going to answer while we're in the breakout rooms are what ideas do you have to increase student voice in CCB and what ideas do you have to increase teacher voice? I'm being specific here, you all. Typically, my way is to talk about educator voice so that we're talking about the education support professionals, that we're talking about the social workers, that we're talking about the psychologists. Like there's so many people who do work in our buildings in education to ensure that students have everything that they need. But we're focusing tonight on teachers and students and the experience in the classroom. So not to negate any of the other fabulous educators that are in spaces that we love. Everybody is important. We need all the pieces. Just this is where our focus is tonight. So any questions about what we're doing before we break out into our breakout rooms? Yes, go ahead, Linda.
Just one question, Gina. Is it about how to increase the voices in general or in specific ways? Like, is it around culture or behavior in specific or about this? Okay.
Thank you. It's CCB specific. It's our work and what we're doing here as well, right? So think culture, climate, and behavior, but also think like in our space as well. Greg, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's great. That your response there, Gina, made me think of the bigger context of the committee and the fact that we don't have a CCB meeting in December. This is our last meeting this semester then as a result. And so it makes me think about the 3 meetings that we've had so far as kind of part of a nice little cycle where we originally identified through the equitable excellence framework that Patrick brought to us, kind of our focus within that. We talked about our policy charge relative to I'm freezing my brain tonight, the BEP, the behavior education plan, and our behavior intervention work. And so now, in order to do that work well, moving forward, we need the framework in mind, but we got to have these voices. And so the idea is we'll get some practical ideas. And as we roll into the work second semester, we'll be ready to go, foot to the floor. So yeah, I'm excited about the ideas that come through for here. So thanks.
Yeah, and because of the Open Meetings Act and because we are a committee that is under the governance of the Open Meetings Act, each room has a note taker who will be taking notes that will go into the official minutes of our meeting. And then when we come back, we'll share out what we had. Now, if you have time to get to this last question, one of the questions that we thought about was like, what are the systemic inequities that impact us not being able to get those voices in the spaces? But let us focus first on what are ideas that you have about increasing voice? Okay, So I think Mr. Tang is going to send us into some fabulous breakout rooms.
Yes, how much time should I set the time for?
Oh, thank you. That's a very good question. We'll come back here at 7:45.
So about 40 minutes? You said 7:45?
30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes.
30 minutes, 30 minutes.
Okay, hold on. You know, the assignments
Actually-
don't look like they all, doesn't look
See-
like all the assignments went through. So I'm gonna open the rooms and then,
I don't know who's on the iPhone either. Who's on the iPhone?
I'm gonna open the rooms, but some of them, there's 4 rooms, you might only need 3, but there's like 2 people in room 1, 1 person in room 2, and 1 person in room 3. But I'm gonna allow people to join the room they want to join, okay?
That's going to maybe be a challenge, Ed. Can you send them? Oh, thank you, Cal. And thank you, Linda, for letting us know that that was Cal. I would say send us to the rooms that we set up, and then we can have people come back if there's only 2 people, and then we'll add them to the other rooms. Can we do that, Ed? Mr.
We
Tang?
can't, I don't have the list in front of me right now. I have to bring it up. Let me open the rooms and then we can just see who goes where.
I'm a teacher. We can wing it. Like, you know, we can make it work. Like,
Right.
we can definitely make it work.
Okay, I'm
That's
gonna
what we
open the
do.
rooms.
Ms. Harris, if you wouldn't mind, put the third question, the third if you get to it question, please in the chat so we have it.
Yeah, it's going to be too late now. Because it won't go to all the rooms, but I can put it in the chat and then we can have Mr. Tang broadcast it out to the whole group.
Understood.
Okay, so some people went to rooms. These
Yeah,
people.
folks
that
are joining rooms. That's okay. They can join rooms. Yep.
Yeah,
Friends,
they
just
can
go ahead and
join
join
the
a room, and then
room.
Greg and Patrick and I will go. Greg and Patrick and I will go to, and Lincoln will go to the
Or I
rooms.
can assign to a room if you tell me which room to put them in.
No worries. If everyone knows how to join a room, so
Ms.
you'll
Harris,
see.
Ms. Harris, look at the bottom of your screen. You
Oh,
see,
yeah, no.
and you
Go
see
ahead.
it says breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Click on it.
Oh, yeah, no, I know how to. I know
Right
how
now,
to.
now, if you want to, I just want to offer you this option. You can now go through those of us who are you see the attendance, and you can say, Patrick, join this room.
Right.
Because you see who's there. You can
Yeah,
direct.
no, I see it. I was waiting for folks to go to rooms. I can
Yeah.
see the list, but thank you, Patrick.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that helpfulness.
So how
Lincoln
do,
is in room 1, so we don't need a note taker in room 1.
There's only
I
one.
need
person
everyone
in
else
room
that's here to
4.
join a room besides Patrick and Greg.
how
It
do I
looks
join
like,
a
yeah, it
room?
looks like room 2 doesn't exist, really.
No
I mean,
one's in there yet,
Yeah,
so,
right, exactly.
okay, there we go. So,
I don't know how to join a room. What do I do?
oh, you're on your phone? We
you got
can
somebody in
assign
I
you.
can send her to room 4.
Okay, great. And then we're gonna
Don't-
move, can we move Cal to room?
I think Cal's in a room, actually.
He is, but by himself. I want to move him to a room so he's with someone. We'll only do 3 rooms because that 4th room isn't going to be needed, I don't think.
Oh, I see.
Where do you want me to go?
I mean, we could put JP and Shalima with Cal in room 2.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Go to room 2,
And Susan.
JP.
And Susan, that works.
So, okay, so someone's gonna put me there. I'm waiting.
Who is that?
That's Susan, Stephen.
Susan, what room do you want to go to?
JP's in.
I got
2.
said 4, but I don't
4?
care.
Okay.
Whenever
No,
you want.
Susan is going to 2.
Oh.
No, she's gone. She's in 4.
Yeah, she's gone.
Okay, well, she's in 4 now. Now
I
JP's
can
by
move
himself.
her to 2.
This is so fun.
This is really something. Yeah,
Okay,
no
who
doubt.
wants to go to 2? There's only James Coughlin in 2.
No, that's why-
Cal is in 1. And
That's why I'm
so-
saying just let's JP go to, move JP to room 3. And then Shalima, can you go to room 4?
As soon as someone lets me know what I'm doing, because I usually it comes up on the screen where you go to a breakout.
Right.
Yeah,
If you
on the
click-
bottom of your screen, it should say breakout rooms. If you click on it,
Oh, yeah, go to room 4?
yes,
Sure,
please.
I can do that.
Thank you. And now Greg and,
Yeah, room 4 got small.
yeah.
Oh, it
did.
looks
So
like they're shuffling themselves, it seems.
they are, yeah. So Greg, how about you go to 4 and Patrick, you go to 3 and then I'll go into 1 with Lincoln.
All right, that's cool. I'll go.
Shalima, did you come back?
I have no why I did. I don't know because I clicked join 4 and it kept spooling.
Okay. Ed, can you send Shalima to 4? Okay. That was an adventure. Thanks,
And I
Gail.
thought it was supposed to just, boom, put everybody there.
No worries. It's, you know, it's
The learning.
our first time doing breakouts.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to room 1. I'll be back.
I had it
Bye.
pre-configured, but for some reason they didn't go there. So
Yeah,
okay.
no worries. No worries.
All right.
They made it to rooms. We're having discussions. It's all good.
Thank you, Jan.
All right.
Yeah.
I wonder if people logged in with different email accounts, and maybe that's why they didn't go to the pre-assigned room.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's not a big issue.
No, they were flexible.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just gonna kind of do some other things for about a half hour. And then I'll come back to you.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Tara.
Ed, I'm sorry, I forgot. I clicked the wrong button and left my room. But I need you to broadcast out the last question. Because I didn't put it in the chat. Can you do that if I put it in the chat?
Oh, I can put it in the chat to everyone.
Well, if we put it in the chat, they're not going to get it in the breakout rooms. It has to be broadcasted out.
Oh, okay. You want me to make you co-host and then you can?
Yes, that would be
Let me
great.
do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so now you should have the broadcast on your control panel. I mean, the breakout rooms, you can.
Yes, totally. Thank you so much.
You see where it says broadcast message?
Yep, I got it.
All
Thank
right.
you. Hey, Ed, I came back because I wasn't sure, will the breakouts automatically close and will they get a notification at 1 minute left? Because it's 1 minute right now.
I just sent the broadcast 3 minutes a minute ago, but usually there's a 1 minute countdown, but I think I may have turned it off. So
That's okay.
Yeah, it will just probably end abruptly.
We'll just say 1 minute and then I just sent a
Yeah.
message. I just wanted to make sure they, when I saw the 3 minutes, I was like, oh, is it going to stop them? Is it going to notify? Because usually it does say, hey,
Yeah.
it does the countdown, but no worries if it didn't. No worries if it did not. Hey, welcome back. I don't know about you all, but our room rocked the ideas. Okay. So can't wait to hear from everyone. And who would like to start? Lincoln, Greg, or Patrick?
I'm always happy to go first. We had an excellent group. We will allow Ms. Harris to think that her group rocked it better than us. We'll give her that. But our group was pretty cool and really smart people. And so here are some of the ideas around increasing student voice in CCB. Give students the question in advance under whatever rules exist, and allow them to spend time with questions or prompts or ideas or whatever, so they can come prepared. I'm not going to read all of this. Increase the number of student participants on the committee. Center students' voices at the start. Offer some sort of service credit or incentive. Don't forget, they have to have service credit hours. Incentivize I almost said membership. That's not what the group said. Incentivize participation. Inform students about CCB. Maybe they don't even know this committee exists and why it matters. A half hour is long. An hour and a half is a long meeting. We got to do something to keep the students engaged. Ask the current students for their feedback. Again, give the questions in advance. I have no idea why I typed that twice. Meetings can be intimidating to them, and we need to think about that. What are we running right now? 24-3? Like, why do I want to be there? Use the breakout small group experience that we used tonight to get students engaged in their small group. What about teacher voice? Give questions in advance to teachers, allow them to come prepared. We understand there may be some rules around that. We're not trying to speak to that. It's just, we threw the idea out. Consider incentives for teachers. It was specifically mentioned, a stipend. I did not hear a single objection from any teacher in my group to that. Representatives should speak on behalf of the consensus of teachers. They were very conscious to say, we want to make sure we're speaking on behalf of the consensus of teachers, which means we may have to get something in advance from teachers so we can speak on their behalf. So how are we communicating in advance with Faculty Senate? Be precise in what we're going to do with the information we receive and how we're going to use it so that teachers feel comfortable sharing. And then lastly, what are the systemic inequities that get in the way of student voice? We ran into this just now. Time could be a barrier. Mid-sentence, we got called back to the group, right? Time is always, it's a problem, but we're bound by it. But the time of our meetings could be a barrier. The length of our meetings could be a barrier. We identified that. Whose voices we tend to center in our school community could be a barrier. Why would I join that committee? They don't listen to kids anyway. They don't listen to students anyway. And we have lots of evidence in our lives, as students where we see that. Another systemic barrier could be misunderstandings about how we define talking back. versus debate that may end in rejection. So they leave with this conclusion: my voice was shot down, therefore it's not important. And we don't frame debate where we don't have to agree, and all of your ideas may not be taken. We may need to do a better job of that. And then lack of personal relationships with potential participants. Like, maybe people will come if they had relationships with people on this committee. I hope that was a sufficient summary for my group and that I did a good job. And that's it.
Thank you, Patrick. It looked like you got some thumbs up that was good. Okay, Greg, you want to go next?
Yeah, happy to. I'll do the same thing. We have a precedent here, so I'm going to be sharing my screen. There we go. How does that work? Can you all see that well?
Yes.
All right. So here are the notes. Yeah, we had, again, I mean, I don't want to introduce a competition, but our group was pretty killer. All right. They did high quality work. And so I'm going to tell you a theme that I'm picking up. I'm going to try to draw connections as I go. So forgive if I do that. But what we saw in our group, what I hear in what we've already heard from the first group, is that a lot of the things that we identified in broad strokes for the student voice is parallel for what we need to bring in teacher voice. Not a surprise. So we're talking about human beings after all, but there are a lot of parallels between these two. So take a look at this. We talked about, of course, we need to find a way to specifically make sure the voices that we're pulling in are representative of the population as a whole in this place, authentically representative. So we talked about ways to get different student groups, reps from those in there. Students definitely, we talked about this experience where students are definitely not afraid to speak up here in the school in a lot of different ways, but the way they want to speak up is in a kid way. They don't want to play by the adult rules that really have defined how we've operated here. And I threw myself right on the top of this criticism. At our last meeting, I was thrilled, man. Here's the policy charge for CCB. And we had 3 kids in here and we had this cool little presentation. I mean, wasn't it great? Of all the and how we want to roll forward, but why were students interested in that exactly? How did that topic relate to their experiences? The truth is it didn't. And so that's kind of the realism that kind of forced us to go this direction. So we have to find ways to engage their ground level experience here. We talked about not just us structuring the format of the meeting so that can happen, but actually allowing students to participate and actually be key voices in how the meeting functioned itself, not just the what and the content and the generative aspect of ideas, but in the structure itself. And then we at the very end here, I'm skipping a little bit, but down here, we talked about this idea of perhaps the way to do that is to recognize that 6:30 to 8, whether it's an hour long or 90 minutes, is not a student-friendly time. And I specifically named a kid as we were talking about this. We talked about Talib, who was a fabulous voice in this committee a year ago, but was very comfortable engaging in school-level systemic conversations. And so the idea is there a way that we can, not all students are going to be immediately ready to do that. So how can we have like little kind of subcommittees or smaller groups here that go out and gather that voice, whether we're talking about teachers or students, that we can then bring back to our space from this 6:30 to 8 o'clock slot. We just have to recognize that if we really want this voice, this time slot in this way once a month can't be the end all be all. It's not going to happen that way. We're limited. So you see a lot of parallels here. A really strong point came up about this notion here for students, but definitely for teachers too. If we want to gather this voice in order to meet them authentically, there needs to be, again, this idea that there isn't a really top-down agenda. There needs to be an idea that it's a safe place where people can share out their notions in a way that isn't artificially structured. It's not to say that it can't be topicless. That's a different thing, but agendas can be restricting. Yeah, I think you can read the rest in here, so I don't want to read the whole thing. But my group, did I miss a key point in that summary? Is that covered okay? All right, cool. Thank you all for that conversation. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, Lincoln.
Well, the ideas were flying so fast and furious in my group that I didn't type anything. So boom. I'm not sharing my screen, but I'm loving the overlap in what I'm hearing and what we heard in our conversation. So a number of the topics that came up, but just to kind of recap we definitely started talking about students in terms of the importance of bringing the conversation to them. The nighttime is not a great time to engage a critical mass of student voice. So is there a way to move this conversation to meet kids where they are, the groups that they're in? Is there a way to have that conversation? And so we talked about that and a lot of different ways to do that. But one thing that I didn't hear that I thought was really interesting is that we talked about the idea of taking our topics and actually just making them school-wide discussion points. So it could be a topic of the month where we could use a period like advisory just to engage the school on different topics. We could make it a competition even to just kind of get engagement, to just get this, because there are going to be some kids who aren't going to join a club. There are going to be some teachers who aren't going to opt in necessarily, but we just thought of it as being a really interesting opportunity to bring the entire school together into the same discussion in the spirit of building community. But if we do that, we know that there needs to be an action step connected to it. So it can't just be a conversation for the sake of conversation. So we really kind of landed in a similar space, talking about bringing this conversation to students and to teachers during the day instead of waiting until the evening. And then in the teacher side, again, a lot of the same ideas of how do we integrate these conversations into the meetings that teachers are already having. So if the teachers are already meeting for division meetings, why not use that as an opportunity to broach some of these conversations? And another thing came up when we started talking about representation. So Gina mentioned the idea of having a student representative on the board as just kind of like a standing way of centering student voice. But then we talked about what is our expectation of a student who serves on this committee? Are they expected to be a representative, or are they allowed to just speak for themselves? Because that can be a barrier. If I feel like I have to represent all Black students or all people on this team or in this club or in this division, that might dampen my own voice because I don't necessarily feel empowered to. I just want to tell my story. So we should think about how we frame this opportunity. Are people coming as themselves or as representatives for a larger group? We talked about being able to be smart about how we interact, understand the cohort of the willing. Are there folks that are already further along in this journey, and how can we activate them to help spread this work out? And I will just kind of, let's see, what else did we get to? We talked about what Linda's doing in terms of office hours. Again, inviting people and encouraging them to use their voice. And when we talked about barriers, we really talked about the biggest barrier being the status quo. As much as we talk about change, there's still a critical mass for people for whom the water's just fine. And they're not going to want to change until they have to change. And so even when we got into the idea of the structure of this meeting, maybe this structure isn't the best structure for everybody. So that was the main barrier we called out. But all in all, I will type up my notes. But there was a lot of overlap in between, across the groups that I was hearing. And I think some really innovative ideas to take into next semester. So thank you.
Wow, that's a lot of really good information. And some really great ideas. I'm looking forward to how do we start to synthesize some of those into actions, like how, if there's things that our committee could do to support the administration in making some of those things actionable, right? I don't know if I would love to hear from you, Greg, about what you think.
Yeah, thanks. You know what I was just thinking as you said that, for whatever it's worth, I love how you framed that, Gina. You asked, what can we do to help make these things a reality for the administration, right? How can we work? And that's really cool because it is going to take something that isn't necessarily top down and your traditional kind of administrative initiative to pull off, right? It's got to be something that works, in multiple ways. So, there are, I don't know if I have a ready-made, and I think if I had a ready-made immediate response to your question, Gina, I think it'd be false. It'd be false. What I want to do is go through the notes, go take a look at what we have here and sit down and process it, and then kind of feel where we really have these key moments of overlap and bring that back to our next meeting. So I'm punting the response because I want to be really thoughtful in what we heard here.
I like that too, because there was a lot of information. There may be some things that might be low hanging fruit that are easy to talk about or actualize. And there may be, when you look at it overall, right, there may be some overall pieces. Well, we have 2 minutes left, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that this conversation really just energized me and gave like fresh ideas moving through my head. Really just so wonderful. Anything anyone wants to add for the good of the group, and then we will close this up here.
And I know I've talked a lot, but I really want to add one point of thanks for this. And I want to underscore how important I think this might be. And I'm going to be really kind of frank with this. One of the criticisms that I've heard over the past few years, and that we've been aware of as a CCB team, but that it's been really hard to address, probably because of the structure, is that we're really existing outside of the actual pulse of the school. We don't really have a good feel of what's actually going on in the day-to-day within the school as far as teachers and students and the real thing of learning is concerned. And this opens the door, I think, this conversation here to really approaching that topic in a better way as we move forward. So I'm really thankful that we had this on our agenda and we structured it the way we did to kind of pull as many voices together. And the challenge is on us to actually do something with this as we move forward. So I just want to say, I think it's potentially very important, and thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. So thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful December. We will reconvene in January.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye, everyone.